Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today we will be presenting our research on lexical features of English in two different countries, which are Russia and Spain. As part of this study, we aim to explore how English is used, adapt, and influenced in these two different countries. That English language is not the native language, but it plays an increasingly important role in society, especially in education, media, and technology. Our research focused on four main areas, which is number one, the history and development of English language in these two different countries. Number two, the current role and development of English language also in these two different countries. Number three, the similarities and difference in how English is used and understood in each country. And lastly, number four, which is the influence of loanwords and code switching in daily speech, media, and youth culture. To put it simply, we wanted to understand how English functions in these different cultural settings, how it blends with local language, how it evolves, and what that says about the growing global influence of English. Okay, so now you may ask why we choose Russia and Spain, because they actually represent two unique linguistic and cultural backgrounds, yet both are increasingly influenced by English daily communication, education, and online spaces. This gives us the chance to compare not just how English is used, but also why and where it differs. Throughout this presentation, we will show examples of how English words have been borrowed into Russian and Spanish, how speakers code switch and how people code switch between their native language and English, and how the spread of English has affected the identity and communication in each country. The purpose of this research is to highlight the flexibility and global impact of English, especially in non-native environments, and to better understand the relationship between language, culture, and globalizations. So without further ado, let's move on to the first slide. Thank you, and let's begin.
For our interview assignment, we had the opportunity to speak with two individuals from two different backgrounds and two expanding countries. First, we like to introduce Daniel from Spain, 28 years old. He originally studied mathematics and later completed a master's degree in statistics. Next, we interviewed Daniel Kisner, a 33-year-old male from Russia. He holds a degree in metallurgy of non-ferrous metal from Siberian Federal University, and he is currently in year 2, semester 4 of Management and Human Resource Management program at Moscow International Academy. In conclusions, both Daniel and Daniel's educational background are suitable and valid for our analysis of English used in expanding circle countries.
Story and development of English in Spain. The spread of English in Spain is closely linked to tourism. Over the years, many British and Northern European tourists have visited or settled in Spain, especially in popular destinations. Because of this, Spanish people saw the need to learn English to communicate better and improve their chances of getting jobs. Programs like Erasmus also played a role by encouraging student exchanges. Over time, English has left its mark on the Spanish language, especially through borrowed words and new meanings.
When do you think English started becoming important in Spanish schools or society?
Okay, so I am not 100% sure, but my guess is that Spain gets a lot of visitors from Northern Europe and from the United Kingdom, and it's one of the favorite tourist destinations of Northern Europeans. So my guess is that the contact from a lot of Northern Europeans when that tourism started, and people started sort of going on exchanges across Europe with stuff like Erasmus. I imagine that's when it started really becoming important for people to learn English in Spain. But my assumption is that's been historically studied for really long. Like schools have studied English, students have studied English for very long. So.
For the aspect number 2, which is current role and progress of English in Spain. English is mostly spoken in Spain's tourist-focused regions, such as the Canary and the Balearic Islands, where the visitors from the UK and the Northern Europe either came here for vacation or settled down. In coastal area, English is widely used for everyday interactions. However, in professional environments, English is mainly used in international companies or workplace with foreign staff from countries like Germany, France, or the Netherlands, where English become a shared medium of communications. Besides, younger Spaniards nowadays have more opportunities to learn and use English due to exposure through social media and exchange programs. Many Spaniards pursue studies in countries like the UK, Germany, Sweden, and the US. This is including his cousin who joined a one-year exchange at 15 years old. With Spain open borders in Schengen zone, English is often used as a bridge language, helping young people access better education and job opportunities.
Definitely going to be the more touristic areas. Spain receives a lot of tourists, especially from the United Kingdom and from Northern Europe. And there's a lot that actually settle in the islands, in the Canary Islands, which is an archipelago off the coast of Africa in Spain, part of Spain, and the Balearic Islands, which is another archipelago in the Mediterranean Ocean, also part of Spain. So there's a lot of tourists there that speak English, and English is oftentimes the language that you hear more in some areas of those islands. Within the peninsula, also in the coast, there's a lot of English speakers, and English is used a lot in, let's say, beach areas. But for professional stuff, you will not really find English very much unless you actually go to act like big corporations that work with people from abroad or companies that have presence in Spain. And
now for aspect number 3, which is lexical features of Spain English, and we'll be focusing on code switching, loan words, and also slang. For the first one, which is the code switching, it often depends on the speaker's fluency. Those who are more fluent in English, like our interviewee, are more comfortable switching between English and Spanish. However, despite Spain being a developed country, many people still aren't fluent in English, so code switching isn't as common as in places like in Latin America. In this case, the speaker gave more of a personal insight than a general example.
Depends on their fluency, right? So people that are more fluent will definitely be comfortable switching. But I know a lot of people who are not, and a lot that simply have no English knowledge. Spain, I would say, within the Spanish-speaking world, Spain might be, one of the places with the least connection to the English language in general, which is surprising because it's probably the most developed in the Spanish-speaking world. Of course, poorer countries will have less. People will know less English, right? But what I'm trying to say is that even for a developed country, it is still a lot of people don't speak it. So, yeah, I guess so. And you would like me to give an example of code switching, like switch to Spanish now? Okay.
Next, for the loan words, English has heavily influenced Spanish, especially in fields like technology and media. Words like CD and DVD are often used even when there are Spanish equivalents. The pronunciation also changes depending on the region. For example, Latin Americans may say DVD in English, while Spaniards might say it as DVD. The speaker also mentioned that English influence on Spanish is not new. It even happened historically, like during Spanish colonization of the Philippines.
As they are typically, if they are educated. If they're not educated, then no. But if they're educated, yes. And for example, words like CD, words like DVD, people will say CD, DVD. But in Spain, they will pronounce the words as Spanish words. So they would say CD or DVD. Or so that's a very significant difference I've noticed between Latin America and Spain. I would say that people typically will try in Latin America, but in Spain, they normally.
Finally, for the slang, English internet terms are widely used by the younger generation. People use words like Google as a verb, and names of social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook appear in daily speech. While not everyone prefers English slang, it's becoming more common in casual and online conversation. Overall, English has blended into Spanish in different ways, showing its strong influence in modern and informal contexts.
Social media networks are all typically aimed at English speakers, like Instagram or Facebook. People use these kind of words. Googling, the word Googling, people say Googling. In Spanish, we say Googlea eso, which means Google that. Yes, for sure. There's many words like that. It's not super common because some people will just try to use Spanish words, but it happens. Yes, for sure.
I see.
Hello, my name is Muhammad Shawadam bin Muhammad Sharif, and I'll be covering the first aspect for the history and development of English in Russia. Let's get on with it. The history and English in Russia began around the mid-16th century, coinciding with initial contacts between Russia and Britain. These interactions contributed to enhance economic and cultural relations with Western countries. This historical foundation fostered a growing acceptance and integration of English, boosting both internal development and external credibility. The interview seeks to understand when Russians began adopting English and whether Russian culture is becoming more receptive to foreign influences, indicating an ongoing evolution of openness driven by historical ties.
First of all, I have to mention, especially this time when people in Russia started speaking English, and I think it was back to Soviet era, from the time when it was Soviet Union and so on. But I have to just clarify a little bit about Russians when they just kind of start to speak English. And I think English gained prominence in Russia during the 18th century under Peter the Great, who encouraged Westernization. In the mid-16th century, saw early contacts with British trades because it was economy, advantages and so on, and that's why kind of people.
Now let's move on to aspect 2, which is current role and progress of English in Russia. So we hypothesize that the Englishanization of Russian is seen in the domain of computer, business, and pop culture. Those under its influence, it has given English a higher prestige, impacting the Russian workplace of use English works. So for the first question of our aspect, which is, have you noticed an increase in use of English words or phrases in Russian workplace, especially in fields like business, technology, or media? And can you give an example? And so that is for the first question. And for the second question, we set up a question which is, do you think using English terms in professional or pop cultural setting in Russian pop cultural settings is seen as more prestigious? Is seen as more prestigious or modern in Russia? Why or why not?
I concede I can see it, as I said before, maybe since 2000 it was too early for me because I was maybe only 9 years old. But maybe since 2010, I was, I, I just saw a lot, just people incorporated their English words into their business, the tech and media. And And actually, especially, I have admitted that especially through online gaming, we can see it a lot because I think this place is the most usable place for English words and terms and just
So, for the next summary for aspect 3, which includes lexical features of the English language in Russia, including code switching, loanwords, and slang. So, the summary is English has significantly influenced the Russian language, particularly through code switching, lexical borrowings, and slang. These features demonstrate how English has integrated into Russian communication, especially in digital and global cultural contexts. The adaptation of English into Russian reflects a blend of linguistic identity and social trends. English words are often used when even Russian equivalents exist, especially in an informal and internet-based communication. This highlights how English expressions have become a normalized part of everyday Russian speech, representing modernity, connectivity in a globalized world.
I can see it. I can see it, as I said before, maybe since 2000 it was too early for me because I was maybe only 9 years old. But maybe since 2010, I was, I just saw a lot, just people incorporated their English words into their business, the tech and media. And actually, especially, I have admitted that especially through online gaming, we can see it a lot because I think this place is the most usable place for English words and terms and just
Now I'll explain the similarities between Spanish English and Russian English when it comes to lexical features, especially in terms of slang. In both countries, English slang has become part of daily communications, especially among the younger generation. In Spain, this influence comes mostly from the social media platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. These app names are in English and people naturally use them in everyday conversation. For example, it's common to hear someone say Google it instead of using a Spanish equivalent. Similarly, in Russian, people are also influenced by English slangs, not just because it's widely used online, but because it's also often seen as cool and shorter than the Russian alternative. People use words like easy, mid, or crazy. Research also shows that younger Russians are more likely to include English borrowings in their speech, while older generations are less influenced, even though they also rely on the internet platforms. So overall, both Spanish and Russian speakers, especially the youth, adopt English slangs in informal and online communication due to media exposure and online and social trends. Now I'll explain the similarities between Spanish English and Russian English when it comes to lexical features, especially in terms of slang. In both countries, English slang has become part of daily communications, especially among the younger generation. In Spain, this influence comes mostly from the social media platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. These app names are in English and people naturally use them in everyday conversation. For example, it's common to hear someone say Google it instead of using a Spanish equivalent. Similarly, in Russian, people are also influenced by English slangs, not just because it's widely used online, but because it's also often seen as cool and shorter than the Russian alternative. People use words like easy, mid, or crazy. Research also shows that younger Russians are more likely to include English borrowings in their speech, while older generations are less influenced, even though they also rely on the internet platforms. So overall, both Spanish and Russian speakers, especially the youth, adopt English slangs in informal and online communication due to media exposure and online and social trends.
As for reflection, as English spreads globally, people's native languages influence how they pronounce and speak it, leading to different accents and local variations. This makes communication easier across cultures and helps connect people worldwide. However, the growing use of English also raises concerns about the decline of local languages and traditions. While English plays a key role in global communication, it's important to protect linguistic diversity. Promoting English should go hand in hand with preserving native languages to maintain cultural identity and ensure a balanced global connection.